The princess translated into Starlight. History is full of tidy lies. It says that the first quiet leap disaster occurred 2,481 years ago, when the early Asteri crown vessel Veyr's Promise attempted one of the first stable faster-than-light transitions in civilized space. It says the ship vanished. It says no wreckage was recovered. It says Princess Seralyth Arien, youngest daughter of the Silver Throne, was lost with all hands. Asteri poems were written about her. Elegant ones, restrained ones. Poems where grief was folded into perfect meter and polished until it no longer embarrassed anyone. One of them became famous enough that schoolchildren still memorized the line. Translated into Starlight, but never received. The poems were wrong. Princess Seralyth Arien had not died. She had been trapped, caught in a fold of time and gravity and failed early FDL mathematics. She drifted for centuries in a state that was neither body nor spirit, neither signal nor memory. She was awake for some of it, asleep for some of it, dreaming for most of it. Then, when Shawcross Bravehammer was 12 years old, he found her. The Bravehammer survey ship had been mapping an unremarkable region of space for the Galactic Federation. Shawcross was supposed to be in the observation blister practicing stellar triangulation. Instead, because 12-year-old boys from D.N.A. worlds possessed a spectacular gift for being exactly where adults had not asked them to be, he had crawled into an auxiliary maintenance bay and discovered a strange white glow floating beside a coolant manifold. Inside the glow was a woman, silver-skinned, motionless, beautiful in a way so old it seemed to come from myth rather than flesh. Any sensible child would have called an adult. Shawcross Bravehammer had stared at her for 6 full seconds, then said, "You look stuck." The woman did not move. So he reached in. The energy field should have torn the skin from his hand. It should have boiled his nervous system and taught the ship's safety officers an entirely new category of paperwork. Instead, because Earthborn humans had a distressing tendency to survive insults from physics, Shawcross grabbed the princess by her incorporeal wrist and pulled. The glow collapsed. The woman gasped and fell through the floor. Shawcross leaned over the deck plating. That was probably not supposed to happen. A moment later, Princess Seralyth Arien rose up through the metal from the level below, hair drifting around her face as if she were underwater, silver eyes wide with outrage. "You," she said, in a language Shawcross somehow understood. "Tiny savage. What have you done?" "I got you unstuck," Shawcross said. "You have made me a ghost." "You were already glowy." "I was not glowy. I was trapped in a transitional non-corporeal space-time persistent state." Shawcross considered that. So, glowy. That was how their friendship began. By the time Shawcross turned 13, Seralyth had stopped calling him Tiny Savage and started calling him Shaw. By 15, she could influence small objects when angry, which meant Shaw's socks began mysteriously relocating whenever he annoyed her. By 18, she had learned enough modern galactic history to become insufferably opinionated about everything. By 25, she had become the only constant in Shawcross Bravehammer's wandering life. She was his invisible friend, his guardian angel, his worst critic, his best companion, and, increasingly, the woman he did not know how to live without. No one else could see her. No one else could hear her. To the wider galaxy, Shawcross Bravehammer was an odd young human with long blonde hair that went wherever gravity and defiance chose to send it, a rifleman's calm hands, a wanderer's boots, and the disconcerting habit of turning his head to answer people who were not there. The Bravehammer family had adjusted. Mostly. "Still talking to the princess?" his sister Mela would ask. "She says your hair looks like a nesting crime," Shaw would reply. "Tell her she's dead." "She says your point?" Their father, Harlan Bravehammer, had once found Shaw alone in the galley at midnight, arguing with a chair. "Seralyth is sitting there," Shaw had said. Harlan had stared at the empty chair, then at his son's absolutely sincere face. "All right," he had said at last. "Princess wants coffee." Seralyth, who had not tasted coffee in 2,000 years and could not taste it now, had placed one translucent hand over her heart. "I approve of your father." Shaw had smiled. "He grows on people." But there were things the Bravehammer family did not joke about. There were secrets they carried deeper than bone. One of them was named Hagedorn. Generations earlier, Captain Elias Hagedorn Bravehammer had discovered a world that should not have existed. From orbit, it looked like an untouched garden planet. No cities. No power grids. No industrial heat blooms. No satellites. No communications traffic. Then the survey team realized the forests were arranged in mathematical spirals visible from orbit. Then they realized the rivers had been guided without dams. Then they realized the weather systems were being harmonized. Then the planet spoke. Not in radio. Not in light. In chemistry. The air itself changed. Fragrant molecules rose from the forests in structured sequences. Pollen carried grammar. Spores carried tone. Perfume became diplomacy. The sentient plant beings of Hagedorn were ancient, advanced, peaceful, and utterly harmless in the way a sunrise was harmless. They had living architecture, organic computation, root networks that preserved memory for centuries, healing blossoms that could repair bodies beyond the dreams of modern medicine, and planet-scale intelligence woven through forest, flower, moss, and vine. They had no weapons. They had no army. They had no hunger for empire. They asked only one thing. Do not tell the galaxy we are here. Captain Elias Hagedorn Bravehammer gave his word. The Bravehammer family erased the coordinates from official logs, falsified survey records, scattered the evidence, and passed the truth down like a sacred flame. Hagedorn wished to be left alone. The Bravehammers said yes. That should have been the end of it. But secrets have gravity, and monsters are drawn to beauty. Planet Galette was famous for three things: rain, theaters, and family funerals that somehow turned into reunions, arguments, drinking contests, reconciliations, and at least one elderly aunt threatening to disinherit someone over potato salad. Shawcross arrived under a sky the color of wet steel. The port city of Auric Quay spread beneath the landing lanes in tiers of gold-lit windows and slick black streets. Rain rolled over glass roofs. Neon theater signs shimmered in puddles. The air smelled of sea salt, fried festival dough, engine coolant, and approaching trouble. Seralyth drifted beside Shaw as he stepped from the shuttle ramp, her silver gown trailing through the deck as if gravity were a suggestion she had declined. I dislike this planet, she said. You've been here for 4 minutes. The rain is performative. It's water falling from the sky. Yes, dramatically. Shaw slung his bag over one shoulder. His long blonde hair immediately caught the damp air and decided to become heroic in 3 directions at once. Seralyth studied him. You look like a warrior prince raised by laundry. Thank you. It was not praise. I'm taking it. At the edge of the arrival concourse, a young woman waved both arms over her head. Shaw. Mela Bravehammer ran toward him and hit him with a hug strong enough to test his ribs. She was 22, compact, sharp-eyed, and had inherited the family's strange combination of warmth and lethal competence. Behind her came 3 cousins, Tor, Laney, and Brig, all Bravehammers by blood or marriage, all grinning like trouble had reserved them seats. You made it, Mela said. Wouldn't miss Uncle Red's funeral. He would have missed yours, Tor said. He missed his own wedding rehearsal, Laney added. Brig nodded solemnly. He believed schedules were a government conspiracy. Shaw smiled, and grief moved quietly beneath it. Sounds like him. Seralyth softened beside him. I am sorry, Shaw. He did not answer aloud. He only lowered his hand slightly, as if letting his fingers brush invisible fingers. Mela caught the movement. Her expression flickered with old familiarity. Princess with us? She asked. Always. Tell her I wore the blue jacket specifically because she hated the green one. Seralyth lifted her chin. The green jacket made her resemble a tactical vegetable. Shaw repeated, She appreciates your consideration. Mela narrowed her eyes. That is not what she said. No. The cousins laughed. The funeral was the next day. That night, as Bravehammer tradition demanded, the younger members of the family took the deceased's favorite living relatives out for noise, food, theater, and very possibly poor decisions. Uncle Red had once declared that mourning without laughter was just bad manners. So they went to the Luminous Reel, a famous performance house built into an old storm wall overlooking the sea. The show was part music, part acrobatics, part holographic melodrama, and part blatant emotional manipulation. Galette Theater specialized in spectacle. Dancers leapt through projected nebulae. A tenor sang about lost ships with enough vibrato to damage glassware. A comic in a fake admiral's coat insulted every major species in alphabetical order and somehow survived. Seralyth floated upside down over the audience, arms folded, unimpressed. This is art. Shaw whispered. People are enjoying it. People also enjoy fermented fungus and elections. Try to have fun. I am having fun. I am judging. During intermission, Lainey bought a tray of sweet firefruit pastries. Seralyth, who could not eat them, took offense at this injustice and retaliated by using her limited influence over the physical world to rotate Brig's chair 3 inches every time he reached for his drink. Brig frowned at the glass. Why is my drink moving? Could be ghosts, Shaw said. Mela looked at him. Shaw, what? Is your dead princess bullying our cousin? Seralyth gasped. I'm not dead. She says she's not dead. Fine. Is your incorporeal antique princess bullying our cousin? Seralyth leaned close to Brig and whispered something into the air. Brig suddenly sat bolt upright and looked toward the ceiling. I have the strangest feeling I should apologize to the chandelier. Shaw pressed his lips together. Mela pointed at empty space. Princess, behave. Seralyth smiled wickedly. Make me. After the show, they followed the crowd into the after-party hall, a huge glass-domed space where rain slid overhead in silver rivers. Musicians played near the central fountain. Performers mingled with guests. Drinks moved on small hover trays. The city lights shimmered below. For 1 hour, grief gave them mercy. They laughed. They told stories about Uncle Red. They toasted him with too sweet galette liquor. Shaw stood near the balcony rail, watching Mela dance with Lainey while Tor argued with an Asteri stage magician about whether misdirection counted as lying. Seralyth drifted beside him, quieter now. You love them, she said. Yes. It frightens you. Everything worth anything does. She turned, studying him with that ancient princess gaze that could make him feel 12 and seen and impossibly grown all at once. When I regain a body, she said, lightly but not joking, I intend to dance with you somewhere scandalously public. Shaw looked at the crowd rather than at her. When? She smiled. Do not pretend you have stopped looking. I haven't. I know. He swallowed. I'm going to find a way. Her expression softened into something dangerous in its tenderness. I know that too. That was when the doors exploded inward. Not from a blast. From boots. 20 armed figures stormed into the party hall wearing matte black masks and long gray coats marked with a red broken circle symbol. They moved with the ugly confidence of people who had mistaken cruelty for courage. One fired into the ceiling. Glass screamed. Guests screamed louder. Down, shouted the lead terrorist. Down, all of you. Hands visible. No heroics. The music died. The rain hissed against the dome overhead. A performer in gold paint started crying. The lead terrorist strode to the fountain edge and activated a projection drone. His masked face appeared huge in the air above the crowd. Citizens of Galette, he said, voice amplified into theatrical venom. Tonight the soft collaborators of alien corruption learn fear. You drink with Asteri. You trade with Varillians. You kneel to Federation weakness. We are the Purity Dawn, and we. A bottle hit him in the head. It came from somewhere near the Bravehammer cousins. For a moment, everyone froze. Tor lowered his throwing hand. Sorry, he said. Reflex. The terrorist staggered. Mela looked at Shaw. Shaw looked at Mela. Brig quietly slid a dinner knife into his sleeve. Lainey picked up a serving tray and tested its weight. Seralyth's eyes brightened. Oh, she said. Family sport. Shaw sighed. Apparently. The lead terrorist ripped off his cracked mask, revealing a narrow face twisted with hatred. Kill that one. 3 gunmen turned toward Tor. Shaw moved. He did not look hurried. That was the alarming thing. Humans from D.N.A. worlds often did their most terrifying work without visible panic. Shawcross Bravehammer stepped sideways, took the percussion pistol from under his jacket, and fired twice. The first round shattered the weapon in one terrorist's hands. The second punched the knee actuator of another's armor and dropped him screaming. Seralyth swept through a third terrorist like moonlight through smoke and whispered directly into his mind. Your weapon is overheating. The man shrieked and threw his rifle away. It was not overheating. Brig caught it before it hit the floor. Useful ghost, he muttered. I heard that, Shaw said. Compliment. The party hall erupted. The terrorists had expected soft civilians. They had not expected Bravehammers. Mela vaulted over a table, kicked a gunman in the throat, landed in a crouch, and drove her elbow into his helmet seal. Lainey smashed her serving tray into one attacker's face hard enough to dent the metal and then used him as cover. Tor tackled the lead terrorist into the fountain with the full commitment of a man avenging both family and bad speeches. Shaw fired with awful precision. He did not waste shots. He did not spray the room. He broke weapons, hands, knees, armor joints. He shot lights above enemies and left civilians illuminated. He moved through chaos like he had been born in it, because compared to most of the galaxy, he had. A terrorist grabbed a Vayrelian singer by the neck and pressed a muzzle to her head. "Stop," he screamed. "Stop, or she dies." The hall froze. Shaw's pistol was angled down. His eyes went flat. Seralyth drifted behind the terrorist. The Vayrelian singer stared forward, trembling. The terrorist's finger tightened. Seralyth leaned to his ear. "Your mother would be ashamed," she whispered. The man flinched. It was only a heartbeat. For a human marksman, a heartbeat was an acre of time. Shaw fired. The shot clipped the terrorist's trigger finger clean off the weapon. Mela was already there. She hit him with a chair, and the Vayrelian singer collapsed into Lainey's arms. Police sirens finally rose in the distance. The remaining terrorists tried to flee. The party guests, having discovered that survival could be contagious, began throwing everything not bolted down. Plates, glasses, shoes. One elderly woman hurled an entire roast fish with such accuracy that Shaw paused to admire the arc. Seralyth floated beside him, delighted. "I like your family." "Yeah," Shaw said, firing one last round through a terrorist's ankle servos. "They grow on people." By the time Galette's security forces arrived, the Purity Dawn assault team lay scattered across the hall in groaning piles, tied up with curtain cords, table linens, and one performer's decorative sash. The lead terrorist was still in the fountain. Tor had his boot on the man's back. "You attacked the wrong after-party," Tor told him. The man spat water and blood. "This isn't over." Shaw holstered his pistol. No one noticed Princess Seralyth Arien standing over the fallen terrorist, silver eyes narrowed. "No," she said softly. "It rarely is." Uncle Red's cremation took place the next morning beneath a gray sky and clean rain. The Bravehammer family gathered on a hillside overlooking the sea. The cremation platform had been built from dark Galette stone, with a transparent windshield arcing around it to keep the flames steady. Uncle Red's favorite battered travel coat lay folded beside the coffin. Someone had tucked a fishing lure into the pocket. Someone else had added a flask. Shaw stood beside his father. Harlan Bravehammer was broad, weathered, and steady in the way of men who had carried too much and learned not to bend where others could see. His hair had gone iron gray at the temples. His hands were large enough to make ceremonial candles look delicate. He looked older today. Seralyth stood on Shaw's other side. Rain passed through her. "I wish I could pay respects properly," she said. "You are." "He never believed in me. He set a place for you at Winter Feast." He labeled the chair Shaw's imaginary royal problem. That was affection. She smiled faintly. "I miss being able to throw things." The ceremony began with memory stones. Each relative placed a small engraved stone in a bronze basin beside the coffin and spoke one sentence. Mela said, "He taught me that cheating at cards is wrong unless everyone is cheating, in which case it becomes culture." Briggs said, "He loaned me money twice and only reminded me about it at every meal for 6 years." Harlan placed his stone last. "My brother was stubborn, loud, generous, and frequently unbearable," he said. His voice held steady, but Shaw heard the grief under it. "He was ours. We were better for having him." The flame was lit. It rose blue-white, clean and solemn. For a few blessed minutes, no one spoke. Then the chanting began at the bottom of the hill. Human butchers, alien lovers, Federation dogs. A line of protesters pushed through the memorial boundary carrying red broken circle banners. Purity Dawn sympathizers. Not fighters this time. Cowards hiding behind grief because they knew cameras would be watching. Their leader was a woman with shaved hair, a scar across her mouth, and eyes burning with the particular spite of someone who had made hatred into a religion. "Burn your dead," she shouted. "Burn the whole corrupted bloodline." Aunt Mara gasped. Mela's fists clenched. Harlan turned slowly. Shaw felt Seralyth go very still beside him. The protesters threw handfuls of black ash toward the ceremony. Most scattered against the windshield. Some smeared across the stone. "Your family protects alien parasites," the woman screamed. "Your dead uncle rots in shame." Shaw moved one step forward. Harlan caught his wrist. "No," his father said. "She insulted him." I heard. She threw ash at his funeral. I saw. Shaw's jaw tightened. Harlan's grip remained firm. Do not give them what they came for. The protesters howled louder, spitting poison into sacred quiet. Then Seralyth drifted down the hill. Shaw watched her go. She passed between mourners and rain and cameras. No one saw her. No one heard the soft rustle of an ancient royal gown moving through wet grass. She stopped in front of the shouting woman. The woman inhaled to scream again. Seralyth leaned close. You are standing at a brother's funeral. The princess whispered into her mind. You are small. You are cruel. And everyone who ever loved you would be ashamed to see what you have made of yourself. The woman's face changed. Not much. Just enough. Her next shout faltered. Another protester shoved forward. Say it. Say the rest. The woman swallowed. Her scarred mouth trembled. Seralyth's eyes were merciless. Leave, she whispered. The woman stepped back. I said leave. The woman turned and walked away. The others stared. What are you doing? Someone hissed. She did not answer. Galette security officers arrived moments later and formed a line. The protesters, robbed of their dramatic center, scattered into ugly muttering. The ceremony resumed. But the insult remained in the air, blacker than smoke. Later, after Uncle Red's ashes had been sealed in the family urn, Shaw found Seralyth standing alone by the cliff edge. You were frightening, he said. She did not look at him. Good. That's not usually your answer. They came to wound mourners because mourners are polite. Her silver eyes cut toward him. I am not always polite. Shaw stood beside her. The sea smashed itself against the rocks below. Thank you, he said. Her expression softened. He was your uncle. He would have liked you. He would have called me imaginary. Lovingly. She smiled despite herself. Neither of them noticed the drone watching from the high wet branches behind them. It recorded Shaw speaking to empty air. It recorded the Bravehammer family gathered around the urn. It recorded Harlan Bravehammer touching the small sealed case he wore beneath his coat. The drone transmitted all of it to a private vessel in orbit. There, in a quiet room filled with ancient artifacts and living prisoners, High Curator Vostrian Pell watched the footage with serene interest. He was Asteri, silver-skinned and beautiful, with white hair bound behind his head and long scholar's fingers folded around a glass of amber tea. His clothing was understated, impossibly expensive, and cut in the old imperial style. Everything about him suggested refinement. Everything except his eyes. His eyes were patient and dead. On the table before him lay fragments of Bravehammer family history collected over decades. Stolen letters, old survey notes, counterfeit navigation slates, scraps of genetic records, a child's drawing of a forest world found in a deceased cousin's storage locker. Hagedorn, the greatest biological treasure in known space. Hidden by sentimental barbarians. A door opened behind him. The captured Purity Dawn leader from the after-party was dragged into the room by two private security men. He had bruises across his face and medical restraints around his wrists. His name was Kern Voss. He tried to spit at Vostrian. One guard struck him across the mouth. Vostrian lifted one finger. Please. I dislike unnecessary coarseness. The guard stepped back. Kern Voss laughed through blood. You're Asteri. Your kind are the rot we're fighting. Vostrian regarded him mildly. You are not fighting anything, Mr. Voss. You are a failed street murderer with slogans. Kern lunged against the restraints. Untie me. No. I'll kill you. You could not successfully terrorize a theater party. Kern's face twisted. Vostrian sipped his tea. But even a dull instrument may be useful if struck against the proper surface. What do you want? Kern snarled. Vostrian gestured, and a projection appeared above the table, a line of Bravehammer names, branching across generations. The Bravehammer family possesses information that belongs to history, coordinates to a world of extraordinary biological significance. Kern spat blood onto the polished floor. I don't care about your collector trash. No, Vostrian said. You care about hatred. Fortunately, that is a simple appetite to feed. The Bravehammers humiliated you. They broke your followers. They made your cause appear pathetic. Kern's nostrils flared. I can have you and your surviving associates released from custody, Vostrian continued. Charges misplaced. Evidence corrupted. Witnesses confused. Galette courts are vulnerable to procedural decay. Kern stared. In return, Vostrian said, you will kill the Bravehammers. All of them present on Galette. During the violence, My people will recover the family archives and private devices. You will also assist in locating Harlan Bravehammer's sealed heirloom case. Kern smiled slowly. Ugly joy spread across his face. You want them dead. I want what they have. Same thing. Vostrian's expression did not change. Do not mistake our purposes as equal. You destroy because you are empty. I preserve because others are unworthy. Kern laughed. You're worse than me. Vostrian set down his tea. I am better than you in every measurable way. Then he leaned forward, and for the first time the gentleman curator's mask slipped enough to show the hunger beneath. The planet Hagedorn is a living archive. Root brains, memory groves, blossoms that repair decay, biocomputational networks grown across continents. Do you understand? Of course you do not. You and your little red circle vermin would burn a garden because a foreign hand planted it. The Bravehammers would hide it because it asked sweetly. Both of you are examples of why treasure requires ownership by superior minds. Kern's smile faded, not from shame, but from the animal instinct that recognizes a larger predator. Vostrian stood. Kill them. Leave the case intact. And perhaps I will allow your followers to keep imagining they matter. Kern looked up at him. And if I say no? Vostrian nodded to the guards. A second door opened. 3 Purity Dawn prisoners were visible in the next room, bound to chairs. One was crying. Vostrian said, gently, I will learn whether your ideology survives listening to your friends beg. Kern went pale. The viewers of history, had they been present, would have understood him clearly then. Kern Voss was hateful. Vostrian Pell was worse. The Bravehammer family gathered that evening at the old rented cliff house outside Auric Quay. It had been chosen because Uncle Red had loved the view, and because it had enough rooms for the extended family, and because Bravehammers tended to prefer walls thick enough to survive weather, arguments, and the occasional cousin learning explosives. Rain lashed the windows. The sea roared below. Inside, grief softened into food. Aunt Mara cooked like she was trying to resurrect the dead through carbohydrates. Tor and Brig repaired a broken table leg that one of them had broken earlier while demonstrating how Uncle Red had once escaped a bad card game. Mela sat cross-legged on the floor, cleaning weapons with the casual ease of a family that considered this normal after being attacked twice in 24 hours. Harlan stood in the study, speaking quietly with 2 older relatives. Shaw leaned in the doorway, watching his family exist. Seralyth floated beside him. You are tense, she said. Someone watched the funeral. Many people watched the funeral. No. Someone watched me talking to you. That made her pause. How do you know? Birds stopped singing in the high branches. Rain patterns shifted wrong. Small rotor noise under wind. She studied him with fond exasperation. You are unbearable when you are competent. Only then. No. Before he could answer, Harlan called from the study. Shaw, come here. The tone was wrong. Shaw entered. His father stood beside the old stone fireplace. In his hands was the small sealed case he had touched at the funeral. It was not metal. It looked like polished darkwood wrapped in living gold veins. Shaw had seen it only 3 times in his life. The Hagedorn case. Mela appeared in the hall behind him, drawn by the same instinct. Harlan looked at both his children. We may have a problem. Shaw stepped closer. The drone. His father's eyes narrowed. You saw it. Heard it. Mela muttered. Of course you did. Harlan set the case on the desk. I received a message 10 minutes ago. No sender ID. Just a phrase. He activated the desk display. The words hovered in the air. Open the garden, or bury your family in it. The room went cold. Seralyth drifted closer to the case. Her face changed. Shaw, she whispered. What? I feel something. Harlan looked at his son. She said something? Shaw stared. His father had never asked with that tone before. Not indulgent. Not patient. Serious. She feels something from the case. Harlan exhaled slowly. Then he opened it. Inside, cradled in a transparent nutrient field, was a living green shoot no longer than Shaw's hand. It looked fragile. It was not. Tiny leaves unfolded in the warm light. Fine golden filaments ran through the stem like veins. The air changed immediately, filling with a scent of rain on leaves, rich soil, sunlight, and something older than language. Mela stepped back. That's from Hagedorn. Yes, Harlan said. Seralyth drifted nearer. The shoot turned toward her. Everyone saw it. No wind blew. No one touched the case. The little plant bent toward empty space, leaves trembling with recognition. Shaw's mouth went dry. Mela whispered, "What is it doing?" Harlan stared at the plant, then at Shaw, then at the empty air beside him. "Shaw," his father said carefully, "where is Seralyth standing?" Shaw pointed. The shoot leaned exactly that way. Mela's face went slack. Tor, who had wandered in with a screwdriver in one hand, froze in the doorway. Brig peered over his shoulder. Why is everyone staring at Shaw's imaginary girlfriend? The shoot released a fragrance so sudden and complex that every human in the room went silent. For Shaw, the scent became meaning. Not words exactly, more like understanding placed gently into the mind. Lost light person, pattern without vessel, pain endured, repair possible. Shaw grabbed the desk with one hand. Seralyth's eyes widened. "She can sense me," the princess whispered. Harlan's voice was rough. "The Hagedorn root lines are in constant communication through entangled seed memory. This shoot is a listening branch. Our family has kept one since Elias made the promise." Mela pointed at empty space, then at the plant, then at Shaw. Wait. Your princess is real." Seralyth put both hands on her hips. "I have been saying that for 13 years. Shaw repeated. "She says she's been saying that for 13 years. Mela sat down hard on the nearest chair. Brig looked delighted. "I owe Tor money." Tor nodded. "So much money." Seralyth, despite herself, laughed. Then the lights went out. Not flickered. Died. Every window in the cliff house turned black, reflecting faces and rain. Outside, something moved in the storm. Shaw drew his pistol. Harlan closed the Hagedorn case and passed it to Mela. "Take this to the lower shelter." Mela stood. "No. Mela. No. You train me too well to pretend I'm luggage." Glass shattered downstairs. Aunt Mara screamed. Then gunfire split the house. The Purity Dawn had come to finish what hatred started. And behind them, with private soldiers and silent drones, came High Curator Vostrian Pell to steal what greed desired. The cliff house became a battlefield in the dark. Purity Dawn attackers poured through lower windows, service doors, and the old garden entrance. They wore civilian armor under rain cloaks and carried illegal scatter carbines meant to shred crowds. Their red, broken circle marks glowed faintly on their masks. They had come to murder mourners. They had come during dinner. They had come for children, elders, cousins, widows, and grieving siblings. They deserved no sympathy. Aunt Mara gave them none. The first attacker through the kitchen window met a cast-iron skillet swung by a woman who had cooked for Bravehammers for 40 years and knew exactly how much force a skull could take before becoming a medical emergency. He dropped without a sound. She stepped over him and shouted, "Not in my kitchen." In the main hall, Harlan and Tor overturned the banquet table and turned it into cover. Mela fired from the stairwell with a compact pulse rifle, each shot bright and controlled. Laney dragged younger cousins toward the rear passage. Brig, lacking a proper weapon, used a fireplace poker and enthusiasm. Shaw moved toward the study. Seralyth streaked ahead of him, passing through walls, scouting. "For coming through the library," she called. "Two with thermal goggles. One has a breaching charge. One is thinking about how brave he looks." Shaw rounded the corner and shot the breaching charge off the man's belt. It bounced across the floor. The attacker looked down. "Oh no," Shaw said. The charge detonated in a contained flash, launching all 4 terrorists backward into a bookcase. Seralyth appeared beside Shaw. "You enjoyed that." "A little." "Good." They fought room to room. But the Purity Dawn were not alone. Vostrian's private soldiers entered through the roof using silent drop harnesses. They did not shout slogans. They did not spray fire. They moved with trained precision, cutting through the chaos toward the study and the Hagedorn case. Vostrian himself walked behind them in a rain-dark cloak, as calm as a man entering a museum after hours. A Purity Dawn fighter staggered past him with a bleeding arm. "Help me," the man gasped. Vostrian stepped aside so the man would not stain his cloak. "No." The terrorist stared at him. Then Mela shot the weapon from his hand, and he fled screaming. Vostrian watched him go with faint distaste. Vulgar tools. Shaw saw him from the upper landing. Even before anyone named him, Shaw knew. The Asteri noble stood too calmly amid murder. His face held no fear, no urgency, only ownership. Seralyth appeared beside Shaw and went rigid. "Vostrian Pell," she whispered. "You know him?" "Not personally." His house existed in my era. Curators, archivists, beautiful parasites who mistook preservation for virtue. Vostrian looked up, not at Shaw, at the empty space beside him. His eyes sharpened. Princess Seralyth Arien, he said softly. For the first time in 13 years, someone other than Shaw addressed her by name. The room seemed to tilt. Seralyth's face went white-silver. You can see me? Vostrian smiled. Not see. Infer. The drone footage. The plant's reaction. Mr. Bravehammer's gaze. And now this delicious silence. He inclined his head toward Shaw. You have been keeping two treasures from the galaxy. Shaw raised his pistol. Leave. Vostrian sighed. The inevitable human verb. Leave. Stop. Don't. Mine. Yours. Such small boundary words. My favorites, Shaw said. Vostrian's soldiers raised weapons. Seralyth whispered, Shaw. I know. Vostrian's smile thinned. Give me the Hagedorn chute and the coordinates. I will take the princess as well, if she may be stabilized. Imagine it. A lost royal of the first quiet leap restored under my patronage. Hagedorn's bioscience cataloged under my authority. History corrected at last. Seralyth's expression hardened with ancient contempt. You have dressed theft as scholarship. Vostrian's gaze flicked toward the empty air. And you have spent 2 millennia as an accident pretending at relevance. Shaw fired. Vostrian moved faster than expected. A personal shield flashed around him, catching the round in a ripple of blue light. His soldiers opened fire. Shaw dove over the landing rail. He dropped 2 stories, hit the hanging chandelier, swung through sparks and broken crystal, and landed behind the overturned banquet table beside Harlan. His father stared. Was that necessary? No. Good form, though. Thanks. Vostrian descended the stairs as bullets and pulse fire carved the house around him. His shield absorbed stray shots. His soldiers pushed forward. Purity Dawn fighters, realizing the noble had better equipment, rallied behind him like vermin behind a wolf. Kern Voss entered through the shattered front doors, face bruised, eyes bright with revenge. Bravehammer, he screamed. You should have died at the party. Shaw glanced at him. You should have given a shorter speech. Kern sprayed fire across the room. A cousin cried out, wounded. Something in Shaw went cold. Seralyth saw it, and, for once, did not joke. Kern laughed. There it is. The famous human rage. Come on then. Shaw rose from cover. Harlan grabbed his arm. Don't chase bait. I'm not. Shaw fired 3 times. One shot blew Kern's weapon apart. One shot shattered the armor plate over his thigh. One shot struck the chandelier chain above him. The ruined chandelier dropped like judgment. Kern Voss vanished under crystal and metal with a scream that ended in a wet grunt. Shaw looked at Vostrian. That was bait. Seralyth's smile was thin and proud. Vostrian's face remained composed, but his eyes had changed. Not frightened. Angry. The kind of anger born when an owner discovers the object refuses the shelf. Enough, the High Curator said. He lifted a small device. Every electronic weapon in the room screamed and died. Pulse rifles shut down. Pistols locked. Targeting sights went black. Vostrian soldiers drew monomolecular blades. The Purity Dawn survivors did the same, grinning. Harlan muttered, That's inconvenient. Shaw holstered his dead pistol and reached behind the fireplace stones. Mela looked at him. What are you doing? He pulled out Uncle Red's old percussion rifle. The weapon was wood, steel, stubborn mechanics, chemical propellant, and absolutely no opinion about electronic suppression fields. Shaw checked the chamber. Seralyth laughed with delight. Vostrian stared at the antique rifle as if Shaw had produced a sharpened farm tool at a diplomatic summit. How primitive. Shaw shouldered it. Runs in the family. The rifle thundered. Vostrian's shield, tuned for modern energy and smart munitions, caught the round badly. It flared, buckled, and threw him backward through the study doors. Shaw broke into a run. The gun battle became a chase through the cliff house, then out into the storm. Vostrian fled not because he was cowardly, but because he was practical. His shield had partially failed. His soldiers were scattered. The Hagedorn case had been moved. The house had become a nest of armed humans who fought like grieving wolves. He sprinted through the rear conservatory, cloak whipping in the rain. Shaw pursued with Uncle Red's rifle in hand. Seralyth flew beside him. He's heading for the old funicular, she said. There's a landing pad below the cliff. Can he signal his ship? Probably. Then we stop him before he gets there. Vostrian reached the cliff path and turned, drawing a sleek Asteri sidearm that had survived his own suppression pulse. He fired. Blue-white bolts cracked through rain. Shaw slid behind a stone marker. A bolt struck the edge, showering him with fragments. Vostrian's voice carried over the storm. You are protecting beings who cannot protect themselves from discovery. Do you think that moral? Hagedorn is vulnerable because your family left it ignorant of danger. Shaw worked the rifle action. They asked us to leave them alone. They are plants. They are people. They are resources wrapped in sentiment. Shaw's eyes narrowed. Seralyth appeared behind Vostrian and whispered into his mind. Your shield is failing. Vostrian flinched. Only slightly. But Shaw saw it. He fired. The round punched through the weakened shield and tore across Vostrian's shoulder, spinning him into the mud. The High Curator gasped, not in pain alone, but in disbelief. His blood was silver red against the rain. Shaw advanced. Vostrian scrambled backward, elegant composure cracking at last. You cannot understand what I would make of that world, he hissed. Memory groves preserved. Healing blossoms cultivated. Root intelligences mapped. Death delayed. Minds archived. Hagedorn could change civilization. And after it says no? Shaw asked. Vostrian's mouth twisted. It does not know enough to say no. There it was. The whole villainy, naked at last. Not rage. Not conquest. The belief that innocence canceled consent. That beauty required ownership. That peaceful people were merely property waiting for a sophisticated thief. Shaw lowered the rifle slightly. My family found a peaceful people in a quiet garden, he said. They trusted us. We gave our word. Vostrian spat rain. A childish oath. Seralyth's voice was ice. A royal one. Vostrian looked toward her, and for one trembling second, perhaps he felt the weight of the ancient princess he had dismissed. The lost daughter of the old Asteri throne. The woman translated into Starlight and never received. Shaw said, You don't get Hagedorn. Vostrian's hand darted to his belt. Seralyth shouted, Shaw. Shaw fired first. The shot shattered Vostrian's transmitter and slammed his hand backward. The device skittered across wet stone and vanished over the cliff. Vostrian screamed. Then Shawcross Bravehammer stepped from the rain behind Shaw, carrying a heavy coil gun recovered from one of Vostrian's own soldiers. Mela appeared beside him with the Hagedorn case strapped across her chest. Tor, Laney, Brigg, and half the surviving Bravehammers emerged along the path, bruised, bleeding, furious, and very much alive. Vostrian looked at them. Humans. Messy. Loud. Emotional. Primitive enough to keep antique rifles above fireplaces and stubborn enough to honor promises made generations before they were born. Harlan aimed the coil gun. High Curator Vostrian Pell, he said, you attacked a funeral house, partnered with terrorists, attempted murder, and tried to steal a protected first contact secret. Vostrian tried to gather his dignity around himself like a torn cloak. You have no authority to judge me. Aunt Mara, who had followed with her skillet still in hand, said, We're not judging. We're deciding whether you need another dent. Even Seralyth smiled at that. Galette's security craft rose from below the cliff, lights cutting through rain. Sirens wailed. Armed officers stormed the path. Vostrian looked at Shaw with pure hatred at last. This is not over. Shaw nodded. That's what the other guy said. What other guy? Aunt Mara lifted her skillet. Shaw said, Never mind. By dawn, the storm had passed. The cliff house was damaged nearly beyond repair. Windows gone. Walls burned. Furniture shattered. Bullet holes everywhere. Uncle Red's portrait had somehow survived, though someone had put a terrorist helmet on it during cleanup and no one had the strength to remove it. The Purity Dawn survivors were in custody. Kern Voss was alive, unfortunately for everyone including Kern Voss, and facing enough charges to make freedom a childhood memory. High Curator Vostrian Pell had been placed in a stasis restraint aboard a Federation security cutter. His political allies were already denying knowing him. His archives had been seized. His private vessel contained stolen artifacts, illegal surveillance drones, falsified court instruments, and enough evidence to bury his noble house under scandal for generations. The galaxy would learn some of what he had done. It would not learn about Hagedorn. Not if the Bravehammers could help it. In the ruined study, the family gathered around the living shoot. The little Hagedorn branch had survived the battle untouched. Its leaves were open towards Seralyth. Everyone could see that now. Not Seralyth herself, but the plant's attention. Mela stood beside Shaw, arms crossed. So let me confirm. Your invisible princess is an ancient Asteri royal ghost from a cosmic FTL accident, and she has been following you since you were 12. Yes. And she pranked Brig at the theater. Yes. And she called my green jacket a tactical vegetable. Shaw glanced at Seralyth. Seralyth lifted one shoulder. Accuracy matters. Shaw said, she stands by it. Mela pointed into empty air. We are going to discuss boundaries. Seralyth smiled. I look forward to winning. Harlan had not laughed much since the funeral, but he laughed then, quietly. It loosened something in the room. Then the Hagedorn shoot released another fragrance. This one was warmer, sweeter. It filled the cracked study with impossible spring, meaning unfolded inside every mind present. Promise keepers. Wounded but whole. Lost light person near. Vessel can be grown. Pattern can be received. Come home beneath leaves. Shaw stopped breathing. Seralyth's hands flew to her mouth. Mela whispered, did everyone else get that? Tor nodded slowly. Either that plant just spoke in my brain, or Uncle Red's liquor was stronger than advertised. Harlan looked at Shaw. His eyes were wet. We have not gone to Hagedorn in a generation, he said. Only sent word through the chute. Only listened. Only guarded. Shaw could barely speak. It can help her. The root lines believe so. Seralyth stood very still. For 13 years, she had been motion without weight, voice without air, touch without warmth. She had teased and guarded and loved from the wrong side of reality. She had watched Shaw grow from stubborn child to dangerous, kind-hearted man. She had whispered comfort when he was lonely. She had made jokes when she was afraid. She had pretended hope was a game because despair would have been too heavy to carry. Now, for the first time, hope stood in the room like something with hands. Shaw turned toward her. I told you I'd find a way. Her silver eyes shone. You did not find it, she said softly. You protected it. He smiled. Same family habit. She reached for him, as she had done 1,000 times, her fingers passing through his cheek like cool light. But this time, the Hagedorn shoot glowed. For one heartbeat, Shaw felt pressure. Not much. A whisper of touch. Seralyth gasped. Shaw's eyes widened. The room went silent. Then Aunt Mara sniffed loudly and wiped her face with the same apron she had worn while disabling terrorists. Well, she said, I suppose we're going to a secret plant planet. Brig raised a hand. Do we pack formal clothes or jungle clothes? Seralyth turned, regal despite being invisible to almost everyone. Both, she said. Shaw repeated, smiling, both. Mela groaned. She's going to be unbearable with a body. Seralyth's grin was radiant. Absolutely. They left Galette before noon. Officially, the Bravehammer family dispersed to private destinations after a traumatic funeral and terrorist incident. Unofficially, 3 ships slipped through carefully falsified routes, passed beyond monitored lanes, and entered a region of space most maps regarded as boring. That was another tidy lie. Shaw stood at the forward viewport of his father's ship as stars stretched into FTL silence. Seralyth stood beside him. For once, she said nothing. He glanced at her. Nervous. I am an Asteri princess of the ancient line. I do not become nervous. Right. I become strategically unsettled. Of course. She looked at him then, and all the sarcasm faded. What if it works? Shaw's throat tightened. Then I'm buying you coffee. I cannot believe you would trivialize my restoration to corporeal existence with bean water. You've complained about not tasting it for 13 years. I have complained artistically. He smiled. She moved closer, close enough that if she had been flesh, their shoulders would have touched. And if it does not work? She asked. Shaw looked out at the stars. Then we keep looking. For a long moment, she watched him. Then Princess Seralyth Arien, lost daughter of the Asteri, translated into Starlight and never received, smiled as if the universe had finally answered a message she had sent centuries ago. The ship dropped from FDL into a quiet golden system. Ahead, a green world turned beneath soft clouds. No station circled it. No city scarred it. No weapons rose to challenge them. Continents bloomed in spirals. Forests shimmered with colors no human language had bothered naming yet. Rivers curved in deliberate grace. Vast flowering structures rose from the canopy like cathedrals grown from patience. The atmosphere itself glittered faintly with living pollen. The planet Hagedorn had waited in secrecy. It had waited because a human family had been asked to keep a promise. And humans, for all their noise, all their chaos, all their dangerous hearts and stubborn hands, could be very good at promises. The comms remained silent. Then the ship's air filled with fragrance. Soil after rain. Sun-warmed leaves. An orchard in bloom. Welcome. Shaw felt Seralyth's hand slip toward his. This time, for the smallest fraction of a second, he felt her fingers. The planet below brightened under the morning sun, and the lost princess began to come home. For those who believed peaceful people were weak, the lesson was simple. They were not weak. They were protected. By roots. By memory. By old oaths. By a dead uncle's rifle. By an invisible princess with a sharp tongue. And by one wandering human named Shawcross Bravehammer, who had once reached into impossible light and pulled out a miracle because she looked stuck. The galaxy was full of monsters who mistook kindness for surrender. They kept learning otherwise, usually from humans, and usually too late. End. Epilogue. The woman received. The first body grown for Princess Seralyth Arien was not built. It was invited. That was how the Hagedorn root lines explained it, though no translation ever felt entirely adequate. The plant beings did not manufacture flesh the way machines did. They did not assemble organs from sterile vats or print nerves from coded proteins. They sang a body into willingness. Deep beneath the emerald canopy of Hagedorn, where memory groves rose like cathedrals and flowers the size of lanterns glowed with soft interior dawn, the root lines gathered what Seralyth had been. Energy, pattern, memory, grief, humor, old royal blood encoded in a ghost without blood, the stubborn shape of a woman who had survived 2,000 years in impossible light, and 13 more as the invisible companion of a strange human boy who had grown into a strange human man. Shawcross Bravehammer stood outside the living chamber while it happened. He had been told to wait. He was not especially good at waiting. The chamber itself had grown from 7 interwoven trees whose trunks curved together without quite touching, leaving between them veils of pale gold pollen and slow-moving light. Hagedorn attendants, tall and slender as young saplings, moved in silence through hanging vines. They were not humanoid in the ordinary sense. Their bodies were grown from bark-smooth fiber, leaf-fine tendrils, luminous sap, and faces that suggested expression the way wind suggested music. One of them stood beside Shaw. Its name, translated poorly, was Root Listening at Dawn. Shaw called it Dawn. Dawn tilted its flower-crowned head toward him, the air filled with meaning. Fear current strong in Promise Keeper Shawcross. Shaw kept his eyes on the chamber entrance. Yeah. Lost light person is carefully held. I know. No breaking. No burning. No forgetting. I know. Dawn's leaves shifted, releasing a faint scent of patient amusement. Knowing does not quiet fear current. No, Shaw said. It really doesn't. Inside the chamber, Seralyth had laughed before the veils closed. She had laughed because he looked terrified, and Seralyth Arien had never been able to resist teasing him when he was noble, miserable, or both. If I emerge with leaves, she had said, you are forbidden to make gardening jokes. I had 3 ready. I know. I heard them forming. He had reached for her by habit. For the first time, she had reached back with something more than light. Not a full touch yet. Not skin. Not warmth. But pressure. Enough. Her face had changed when she felt it. The mischief had vanished. The ancient princess had looked suddenly young, suddenly frightened, suddenly so full of hope that Shaw would have fought gods to protect the expression. Then the chamber had closed. Now he waited. Mela waited with him for the first hour, then the second. Harlan waited in silence by the root altar, one large hand resting on the Hagedorn chute that had guided them there. Aunt Mara prayed in 3 languages and threatened the universe in a 4th. Brig paced until a Hagedorn vine gently caught his ankle and made him sit down. Shaw did not pace. He stood. That was worse. At last, the veils opened. Light spilled out. A woman stepped through it. For one impossible second, no one breathed. Seralyth Arien stood barefoot on the living floor, silver-tinted skin glowing softly beneath the green-gold light. Her dark hair fell over her shoulders in waves. Her eyes were exactly as Shaw had always known them, bright, sharp, ancient, amused, and painfully alive. She wore a gown grown from white petals and fine living fiber. It moved as she moved. Her hands trembled at her sides. Hands. Real hands. She looked down at them as if she had been handed stars. Then she inhaled. A true breath. Her face broke. Not elegantly. Not with Asteri control. Not like a royal icon restored for public reverence. She sobbed. Shaw crossed the chamber in 3 strides. Seralyth met him halfway. When they collided, she was warm. Solid. Alive. She made a sound against his chest that was half laugh, half broken prayer, and Shaw wrapped his arms around her as though all the empty years could be crushed between them and made harmless. For 13 years, she had passed through him like moonlight. Now she clung to him with fingers curled in his coat. "Shaw," she whispered. He shut his eyes. There were many things he could have said. Clever things. Gentle things. Profound things. Shawcross Bravehammer, being himself and nothing more, said, "No leaves." Seralyth laughed into his chest and struck him with one newly living fist. It hurt. He had never been happier to be hit in his life. The return of Princess Seralyth Arien did not remain quiet. It could not. Some truths were too large for secrecy. Some names had been carved too deeply into history. The Asteri had mourned Seralyth before many of their modern nations had borders, before half their current dynasties existed, before emotional regulation had become polished into cultural doctrine. She had been a poem, a tragedy, a lesson in the risks of early ambition, a royal daughter translated into Starlight and never received. Then she walked down the living ramp of a Hagedorn-grown diplomatic vessel into the high reception hall of the Asteri homeworld, breathing, blinking, and looking deeply annoyed by the number of ceremonial cameras pointed at her. The Asteri broke composure. Not all at once. Not loudly. They were still Asteri. But across the hall, hands covered mouths. Perfect posture faltered. Silver faces went pale. Old scholars wept without permission from dignity. Nobles bowed too quickly. Children stared. The royal archivist fainted, recovered, apologized, and fainted again. Seralyth stood before her people as a living impossibility. Shaw stood 3 steps behind her in formal clothes that Mela had described as barely acceptable, and Seralyth had described as a heroic defeat for tailoring. His long blonde hair had been tied back for approximately 4 minutes before escaping in 2 directions. Asteri cameras adored him against their will. The High Crown Regent approached Seralyth with trembling hands. "Princess Arien," he said, voice almost steady. "Daughter of the first silver line. Lost star of the quiet leap. Your people receive you." Seralyth's face changed. The mischief softened. The sarcasm folded away. Something older stood in her then. Not colder. Older. She inclined her head. "I was long delayed," she said. A sound moved through the hall. Not quite laughter. Not quite sobbing. Shaw smiled before he could stop himself. That was his Seralyth. But the joy of her return came with gravity. Asteri historians needed her. Genetic archivists needed her. Royal courts needed her. Diplomats needed her. The public needed her. Every schoolchild who had memorized the old poems now wanted to hear the woman behind the line. Every faction wanted to claim what her return meant. Every family descended from the early Leap era wanted her blessing, her memory, her grief, her presence. And then there was Hagedorn. The secret garden world had chosen to step, carefully and deliberately, into the light. The Bravehammers guarded that transition like wolves guarding spring. They refused exploitative trade contracts. They blocked cultural trespass. They personally escorted Federation observers. They made ambassadors wait when Hagedorn asked for silence. They threw out 3 corporate delegations, 1 illegal bioprospecting team, and a philosopher who kept trying to argue that consent was a negotiable interpretive framework. Aunt Mara hit that one with a ladle. No one filed a complaint. The Hagedorn joined the Galactic Federation on terms unlike any member world before them. No unrestricted tourism. No extraction rights. No biological sampling without living consent from the root lines. No military installations. No ownership of Hagedorn-grown technologies outside mutual stewardship accords. In exchange, Hagedorn gave the Federation miracles. Not all at once. Never carelessly. But steadily. Living medical gardens that could regrow damaged nerves. Memory groves where dying elders could leave impressions for their descendants without becoming trapped or copied. Organic computation that did not replace machines, but taught machines patience. Atmospheric harmonics that healed damaged climates over decades instead of centuries. Diplomatic philosophy rooted in reciprocity rather than leverage. Energy systems that grew like orchards, storing sunlight, tidal pull, thermal gradients, and even grief, though the last was never adequately explained. Across the Federation, worlds changed. Not into Hagedorn. The plant beings did not colonize. They pollinated possibility. The Asteri found themselves unsettled by a civilization more stable than theirs, and yet warmer, less controlled, less afraid of tenderness. The Varelians listened to Hagedorn's songs and wept in colors. The Brindle folk declared themselves official heroic shrub allies, built a ceremonial embassy shaped like a flower cannon, and were gently, firmly asked to move it 6 kilometers farther from a sensitive root sanctuary. Humans, being humans, alternated between reverence, curiosity, terrible jokes, and fierce protectiveness. The Bravehammers became wardens of the threshold. Not rulers, not owners, guardians. Harlan negotiated. Mela commanded security teams. Tor handled transport screening. Laney built cultural orientation programs. Brigg accidentally became beloved by 3 Hagedorn sapling schools after teaching them card tricks. And Shawcross Bravehammer drifted through all of it with a hole in his life the size of a woman. Because Seralyth had gone to her people. She had needed to. He understood that. He hated it. Both could be true. Loneliness did not strike Shaw immediately. At first there was too much to do. Hagedorn needed guarding. Federation envoys needed guiding. Opportunists needed intimidating. Hagedorn's living science needed time, translators, ethics boards, and Bravehammer common sense standing between wonder and greed. Shaw worked. He was good at work. He could stand watch for 16 hours without complaint. He could spot a hidden scanner in a diplomat's ceremonial cane. He could outshoot mercenary probes, outweight smugglers, and outstare officials who believed polite words made trespassing less ugly. He could do all that. But he no longer turned his head and found Seralyth floating beside him. That was the first wound. A joke would form in his mind, and there was no silver-eyed princess to answer it before he said it. He would reach for coffee and remember she could finally taste it, somewhere else, probably insulting it in front of horrified Asteri courtiers. He would wake in the night because for 13 years some part of him had known she was near, moving through walls, humming old songs, whispering sarcastic commentary about his sleeping posture. Now the room was simply a room. Empty air had become empty again. That was the second wound. His family noticed, of course. Bravehammers were not subtle about noticing. Mela found him one evening on a high root bridge overlooking a valley of luminous flowers. The flowers opened and closed in slow conversation beneath the stars. "You look awful," she said. "Thanks. I mean emotionally. Physically you look annoyingly heroic." He leaned on the rail. "I'm fine." "No, you're useful. Those are different." Shaw said nothing. Mela stood beside him. For once, she did not tease. "You miss her?" "Yes. You could go to Asteri space." "She has duties. She'd probably want you there." "She has duties," he repeated. Mela studied him. "You know being selfless and being stupid can wear the same hat." He looked at her. She lifted both hands. "Just saying." Shaw's mouth twitched, almost a smile. But he did not go. Seralyth belonged to her people as much as she belonged to herself. That was how he thought of it. She had been stolen from history. Now history wanted her back. He would not tug at her sleeve like a child because his own life had gone quiet. He loved her. Therefore he would not make his loneliness into a chain. That was noble. It was also miserable. Harlan found him later in the weapons bay, cleaning Uncle Red's old rifle for the 4th time in a week. His father stood silently until Shaw finally said, "I know." "Know what?" "That you're about to say something wise and irritating." Harlan nodded. "Saves time." Shaw set the rifle cloth down. His father leaned against the workbench. "When your mother died, people told me to move on." Terrible phrase. Move on. Like love is a road obstruction. Shaw looked down. "I learned something else," Harlan continued. "You don't move on. You build bigger. You make a life with room for what you lost, what you still love, and what may come next." "She isn't lost." "No, but she is not here." Shaw swallowed. Harlan's voice softened. "Son, you pulled her out of Starlight when you were 12. You guarded her when no one believed she was real. You brought her to the one world that could save her. Do not decide for her that she has no room for you now." Shaw did not answer. He was, as Seralyth often said, catastrophically resistant to useful advice. Seralyth returned without warning. This was exactly like her. Shaw was on Hagedorn's northern landing field, arguing with a Federation customs official who believed the phrase, limited ceremonial soil sample, should not count as smuggling. It is soil, the official said. It is Hagedorn, Shaw replied. It's a spoonful. It's a person's front porch, a library, and possibly someone's grandmother. The official stared. Possibly. With Hagedorn, you ask first. A voice behind Shaw said, he is correct. Also, your shoes are offensive to the moss. Shaw went still. For one moment, the whole living world seemed to hold its breath. Then he turned. Seralyth stood at the edge of the landing field, alive beneath the Hagedorn sun. She wore Asteri traveling clothes of deep blue and silver, formal enough to satisfy protocol, and fitted with enough hidden pockets to suggest she had spent too much time around Bravehammers. Her hair was pinned in royal style, though several rebellious strands had escaped, which made Shaw absurdly happy. Behind her waited an Asteri diplomatic shuttle and a small delegation trying very hard to look as if their princess had not just walked away from them mid-schedule. Shaw forgot the customs official existed. Seralyth crossed the grass toward him. He did not move until she was close enough to touch. Then he said, because his heart was too full for poetry, you're late. Her eyes shone. I was delayed by civilization. Sounds serious. Terrible. Speeches. Councils. Ceremonial unveilings. 3 operas. 1 statue that made my nose look accusatory. That's your natural nose. She stepped closer. Careful, Shawcross. He smiled, and it hurt. Then she stopped joking. The pain in her face matched his so closely, it was almost a relief. I missed you, she said. The words were small. They broke him more thoroughly than any grand declaration could have. Shaw's voice came out rough. I missed you too. No, Seralyth shook her head. You do not understand. They received me as a myth. A princess. A relic. A symbol. A political miracle wrapped in old grief. Her hand found his. Warm. Real. Trembling. But you received me when I was no one's proof of anything. You received me when I was invisible and annoying and trapped between worlds. Still annoying. Do not ruin my speech. He shut his mouth. She squeezed his hand. I have duties, she said. I will always have duties now. To my people. To Hagedorn. To the Federation. To history, apparently, though history has been very rude to me and deserves less of my time. Shaw nodded. I know. I also have a life. His breath caught. Seralyth looked up at him, silver eyes fierce. And I want you in it. A Hagedorn breeze moved through the landing field, carrying the scent of blossoms and the unmistakable impression of many plant beings pretending not to listen. The Asteri delegation behind Seralyth stood in absolute diplomatic stillness. Mela, who had appeared at some point because sisters have supernatural timing, whispered loudly, finally. Seralyth ignored all of them. Shawcross Bravehammer, she said. You are stubborn, underpolished, socially inconvenient, allergic to proper tailoring, and resistant to adaptation in ways that scholars may someday classify as geological. Thank you. But you are also loyal without possession, brave without theater, gentle without weakness, and mine in every way that matters, unless you object. He stared at her. Shaw was not built for courts. He was not built for palace life, symbolic marriages, diplomatic schedules, or smiling while old Asteri nobles debated the emotional implications of his hair. He was a wanderer, a marksman, a man who helped where he could and ignored half the things that drove other beings to madness. It was against his nature to become something polished. So he did not. He found another way. I can't become one of them, he said softly. I know. I won't fit. I know. I'll say the wrong thing. Constantly. I'll hate the clothes. I will enjoy that privately. I need open sky. Work. Family. Places where people say what they mean before everyone dies of manners. Seralyth smiled. Then we will make room. Shaw looked at their joined hands. For 13 years he had loved a ghost enough to let her go. Now the living woman had come back and asked him to stay. He nodded once. That was all. For him, it was everything. Seralyth rose on her toes and kissed him under the Hagedorn sun. The Asteri delegation made several small sounds of cultural crisis. Mela cheered. Somewhere in the grass, Hagedorn flowers burst open in radiant gold. The customs official quietly put the soil sample back. Their marriage became a diplomatic event, a cultural crisis, a public obsession, and a family party. The Asteri wanted ceremony. The Bravehammers wanted food, music, and a security perimeter. Hagedorn wanted living vows exchanged beneath witness trees. Seralyth wanted all of it, and pretended this was not sentimental. Shaw wanted Seralyth, so he endured the rest. He stood beside her in the great silver hall of the Asteri homeworld while nobles bowed to a princess returned from myth and the human who had found her an impossible light. He stood beside her on Hagedorn beneath trees that remembered the first promise his family had made. He stood beside her in a noisy Bravehammer feast where Aunt Mara cried. Brigg made an inappropriate toast. Mela threatened anyone who made Seralyth unhappy, and Harlan hugged his new daughter-in-law with the quiet force of a man who understood second chances. Shaw did not become polished. He became present. He learned enough Asteri court etiquette to avoid starting wars accidentally, though not enough to stop Seralyth from enjoying his mistakes. He wore formal clothes when he had to, and kept boots suitable for running hidden nearby. He attended councils, then disappeared to help Hagedorn security teams inspect a suspicious cargo hold. He became, to the bafflement of refined society, both royal consort and practical nuisance. The Asteri children loved him. The old nobles feared his honesty. The Hagedorn trusted his family. The Federation learned that any treaty involving Seralyth Arien would eventually include Shawcross Bravehammer leaning against a wall, listening quietly, and then asking the one blunt question everyone else had polished out of existence. Seralyth became what history demanded and what love allowed. Princess, ambassador, symbol, woman, wife. She moved between worlds with Shaw beside her when he could be, and with him waiting when duty pulled them apart. They kept rooms on the Asteri homeworld, a small wild house on Hagedorn grown half from living wood and half from Bravehammer stubbornness, and a cabin aboard a ship whose navigation systems had been politely modified by Vayralians and impolitely reinforced by humans. Sometimes they stood in royal halls under ancient banners. Sometimes they walked through Hagedorn forests while the root lines hummed beneath their feet. Sometimes they returned to ordinary human places where the coffee was bad, the chairs were sturdy, the weather was rude, and Shaw could breathe without protocol watching him do it. They belonged to many worlds. But always, somehow, they found their way back to each other. Years later, when children across the Federation learned the corrected poem of Princess Seralyth Arien, the final line had changed. No longer translated into Starlight, but never received. Now it read, translated into Starlight, guarded by promise, and received by human hands. The scholars argued about whether the line was too emotional. The Asteri courts debated whether it simplified history. The Bravehammers liked it. Hagedorn approved in blossoms. And Seralyth, whenever Shaw recited it in that dry voice of his, would roll her eyes, take his hand, and remind him that technically he had pulled her out by the wrist. He would always answer the same way. You looked stuck. And she would always smile. Because once, long ago, she had been. And because now she was not.